April 12th unfolds in Islamabad with 21 hours of talks collapsing like a house built on water. The Pakistani military chief prepares to carry a message back to Tehran, but before he leaves, before anyone can second-guess the decision, the order goes down the chain of command. CENTCOM receives the signal. The choice has been made at the highest levels. No more negotiations. No more diplomatic theater. The blockade launches in less than 24 hours, and the Persian Gulf transforms from a corridor of commerce into a zone of military enforcement. At 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time on April 13th, exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon Greenwich Mean Time, the net closes. The strait becomes a contested space. Over 10,000 personnel mobilize across the Middle East. 12 warships begin moving into position with purpose that cannot be mistaken. The USS Abraham Lincoln is already there, her decks full of aircraft, her radar sweeping the horizon. The USS Gerald R. Ford, fresh back from repairs in Greece where she spent weeks in the shipyard, takes station with her strike group. The USS Tripoli steams into position with the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit embarked. Over 2,000 Marines ready to act on minutes' notice. Destroyers USS Frank E. Peterson Jr. and USS Thomas Hudner move to their assigned patrol sectors. More than 100 aircraft are now in range. F-18s and maritime patrol planes, each one a message written in steel and velocity. This is not a suggestion to comply. This is not a request to reroute. This is a physical wall of steel placed between Iran and the world's shipping lanes, and every captain who reads the news understands exactly what it means. The decision that puts these ships in motion is tactical and political at the exact same moment. The enforcement zone is positioned deliberately outside the Persian Gulf itself, maintained in the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea, maintaining distance from Iranian shores. This positioning matters in ways that go far beyond the map. Distance creates choice. Choice creates optionality. Optionality means Beijing doesn't feel cornered by American aggression. Optionality means there is still a diplomatic off-ramp, a way for China to back down without losing face. The first 12 hours pass and the system begins to show what it can do. 6 commercial vessels attempt transit through the enforcement zone, each one carrying cargo that would normally flow into Iranian ports without question. All 6 are redirected. No shots fired, no warning shots across bows, no confrontation at all, clean compliance. Every captain who tries learns the lesson immediately. The blockade is real, and the cost of testing it is higher than the profit in the cargo. The message propagates through the maritime networks in the hours that follow. A silent warning passed from radio to radio, from ship to ship, across the electronic channels where merchant captains share information about dangerous waters. Hour 13 through hour 24. The momentum builds like a wave that cannot be stopped. 8 tankers are intercepted in the second operational day. 8 tankers carrying oil products and refined goods intended for Iranian distribution networks. Every single one complies with the interdiction order. Not a single captain tries to run the blockade. Not one attempts to make a dash for the strait under cover of darkness or fog or the sheer tonnage of merchant traffic. The operation unfolds exactly as the planners designed it in the Pentagon and at CENTCOM headquarters. The system works. The enforcement holds. The capability meets the will. By hour 24, moving into hour 36, the rhythm of interceptions continues. The declaration comes down from the upper levels of command. The blockade is now fully implemented. CENTCOM states it with the confidence that comes from overwhelming force properly deployed. They announce to the world that no vessels have breached the blockade. The statement goes out to the press, to the Pentagon, to the allies who have been following this operation with intense interest. CENTCOM is saying that the seal is complete, that the blockade is working, that the enforcement is absolute. But that statement has a hollow echo even as the words are being transmitted. Because they are wrong, and the people in the command room know it almost immediately. The BBC Verify team has been working the phones and checking the satellite imagery and the signal's intercepts. They have the numbers. At least 4 Iran-linked vessels have already crossed through the Strait of Hormuz during the blockade. 3 of them are sanctioned ships whose presence in Iranian waters should trigger immediate international consequences. Iranian logistics channels are already adapting, already finding ways through the net, already routing cargo through different flags and different payment structures. The blockade that is declared fully implemented is already showing cracks before the declaration is even finished being transmitted. But there is one vessel that matters more than all the rest combined. The MV Rich Starry, Chinese-owned on the corporate documents but Malawian flagged to obscure that ownership. She has been spoofing her transponder for 11 days, broadcasting false position information and false vessel identification into the electronic noise of global maritime traffic. She is deliberately hiding her identity, trying to slip through the system unnoticed. She is heading directly for the Strait of Hormuz, carrying approximately 250,000 barrels of methanol, a chemical product that Iran needs for its manufacturing base and its fuel production. The blockade team has all of this information. Their satellites show the vessel. Their signals intelligence shows the spoof transponder. Their intelligence analysts understand the connection to Iranian interests. The rules of engagement are clear. They are written and signed and briefed to every commanding officer in the enforcement zone. The weapon systems are ready. 2 destroyers were positioned specifically on April 11th, before the talks even collapsed, before the decision was made, positioned for mine-clearing operations and close-in interdiction. They can move to intercept the rich Starry within hours. They have the authority. They have the capability. They have the tactical justification to board the vessel, seize the cargo, and turn the ship back before she ever reaches the strait. This is the moment that changes everything. This is where the operation transforms from a straightforward military blockade into something more complex and more revealing about how power actually works in the 21st century. The decision comes down and it is clear. Do not intercept Chinese shipping. Not because they cannot, because they choose not to. This decision is diplomatic in its essence, dressed up in operational language to make it sound like a tactical call. The logic is cold and strategic and entirely rational. If a destroyer board a Chinese-flagged vessel, if American Marines storm the bridge and secure the cargo, you cross a line with Beijing that may never be uncrossed. You force Beijing to respond to the humiliation. You close off the diplomatic off-ramp that still exists between Washington and China. The possibility that this entire crisis might be resolved through negotiation rather than confrontation. You escalate when escalation serves no strategic purpose beyond enforcing absolute consistency. So the MV Rich Starry is turned back initially. The blockade works. The signal has been sent. The system appears to be functioning as designed, turning back a vessel that tried to break through. The press would report this as confirmation that the blockade is real. The officers in the command room would see it as a successful interdiction. The message goes into the operational log and the moment seems to resolve cleanly. But then, in the early hours of April 14th, the Rich Starry tries again. Darkness has fallen over the Arabian Sea. The vessel reduces her electronic signature, turns off non-essential systems, moves slowly to avoid showing up on radar the way the naval ships show up, bright and obvious and impossible to miss. A command room somewhere decides that pushing the engagement further is not worth the diplomatic cost. The choice is made to let her pass. The vessel proceeds toward the strait. The methanol reaches Iranian ports. The blockade that is declared fully implemented has just been breached by a ship that the American military absolutely could have stopped. This is not simply about one tanker or 250,000 barrels of methanol. This is about what the blockade means now, after 36 hours, after the show of force, after the declarations of success. For 36 hours, CENTCOM held the line with absolute discipline. They showed the capability that money and training and the resources of the world's dominant naval power can create. 12 warships, over 10,000 personnel, more than 100 aircraft. They moved 6 vessels out of the enforcement zone in the first 12 hours. They intercepted 8 tankers in the first day and a half of operations. Every interception was clean. Every captain complied without resistance. Every moment of the enforcement displayed the power and the will to use it. Then the test came, and it came in the form that mattered most. A high-profile Chinese vessel carrying cargo to an Iranian port. A ship that could not be stopped without triggering a confrontation with another great power. And the decision was made to let it pass, to accept the breach rather than enforce the blockade at the cost of escalation with Beijing. You can call it strategic patience, the kind of thinking that considers the long game and the possibility of de-escalation. You can call it preserving diplomatic options, keeping the door open for negotiation when negotiations might still be possible. You can call it understanding that blockades in the 21st century are not absolute seals that no ship can cross. They are statements of intent. They are tools of pressure. They are mechanisms for conveying political messages through the medium of military force. But the captains of merchant vessels see something entirely different now. They see that the blockade has rules that are different depending on what flag the ship carries. They see that enforcement depends on flags and political relationships and calculations of what Beijing will tolerate. They see that a Chinese tanker can slip through in the dark, that the rules change when the ship is valuable enough to Chinese interests. They understand now that the blockade is not a simple binary choice between compliance and consequences. The calculation for the next ship changes. The captain of the next tanker heading for the strait will make his decision, knowing that exceptions exist, that the blockade is negotiable if the ship carries the right flag or has the right political protection. The blockade is still in place. CENTCOM's firepower is still deployed across the waters of the Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Oman. The missiles are still ready. The aircraft are still in the air. The command rooms are still staffed, and the communications networks are still alive with the traffic of military operations. But the credibility of the blockade just took damage that 36 hours of perfect enforcement cannot repair. The message that went out in the first day and a half was that the blockade is absolute, that enforcement is consistent, that every ship that tries to breach it will be stopped. The message that goes out now is that the blockade is conditional, that exceptions exist, that political relationships matter more than consistency. By April 15th, the Pakistani military chief arrives in Tehran, carrying Washington's message about what comes next. The ceasefire that was supposed to follow the blockade, the diplomatic agreement that the blockade was designed to enforce, that ceasefire is set to expire in roughly 6 or 7 days. The choice not to intercept the MV Rich Starry was a choice to de-escalate, to back away from the brink of direct confrontation with China, to preserve the possibility that diplomacy might still succeed where military force alone cannot. But it was also a choice to accept that the blockade's power is not in the physical enforcement of an absolute barrier. The power of the blockade is in the political theater that surrounds it, backed by force that is real, but constrained by the logic of great power politics. History echoes in this moment. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, when American naval forces surrounded the island and established the quarantine, a Soviet freighter named the Bucharest was allowed to pass through the American naval line. The decision to let that ship pass was made for reasons similar to the decision made about the Rich Starry. The recognition that escalation with another nuclear power had to be carefully managed, that absolute blockade enforcement was less important than avoiding direct confrontation that might spiral into catastrophe. The same calculus that John F. Kennedy and his advisors made in 1962 is the same calculus that the commanders in the Persian Gulf make in April 2026. The technology has changed. The weapons are more powerful. The distances are different. But the fundamental logic of how great powers manage confrontation, when both sides have the capacity to escalate, remains the same. Everyone in the command room knows the difference between what the blockade is supposed to do and what it actually does. The blockade can interdict vessels. The blockade can create economic pressure. The blockade can make shipping more expensive and slower and less reliable. But the blockade cannot be perfectly enforced, when enforcement would require actions that damage critical relationships with other powers. The blockade is a statement backed by force, not an absolute physical barrier that no ship can cross. And in the Persian Gulf, where commerce and conflict have been entangled for centuries, every captain, every commander, every official watching this unfold understands that distinction perfectly. The ability to enforce is not the same as the choice to enforce, and power lives not in the capacity, but in the decision.